And CIS webinar series, a deep dive into the CIS benchmarks. This is episode 39 of, I believe, 41 episodes. We're going to close the season with the unpopular opinion guy, Josh Copeland, will be returning to close the season. And then we'll be promptly going into browser hardening settings. So really excited about that next one. Browsers are getting continuously talked about as really this container for all of your SaaS apps, your security apps, and maybe we'll talk to Corey about that today later with browser security. But want to, of course, introduce Corey. I've had the pleasure of meeting him about half a year ago, and we've really built a relationship since then. But Corey, I'm going to botch your introduction, but man, you have been an entrepreneur, a C-level at Cylance. I mean, you really focus on that customer side, but you also have this incredible security background. So huge thank you for joining our webinar series and being the SME for today. And if you don't mind just kind of kicking off, who is Corey and what's Cyvatar? What did you build out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Zach. I really appreciate you having me. The CIS is near and dear to my heart, is what we use in our platform as well at Cyvatar. But a little bit about my background and not going too deep because I've been doing it for 29 years. So I got story after story after stories.
It's easy to go deep when you're the owner and entrepreneur, man. We got the good stories, we got the bad stories.
Exactly. I'll sprinkle some in as we go through this. But the crux of the matter is when you think about cybersecurity in 2024, when I started in 1995, you look at the evolution of all the things that have happened, and I'll just leave everybody with this: we're doing everything wrong right now as an industry.
Just start with that.
Just start with that, and what I mean by that, let me give you an example. We are heading closer toward big pharma as an industry versus the preventative side. We aren't the vitamin industry. We're heading more toward big pharma because there's so much of a focus on detect and respond and monitoring and incident response and hey, it's not a matter of if but when you're going to get hacked, all that kind of mindset. Without, take this webinar, without the hardening being done, nobody's focusing on, hey, what if we harden our systems? What if we lock down ourselves and make sure that we don't get hacked? Don't even talk about that. It's more incident response firms than preventative proactive firms. So again, that's what I mean by we're heading in the wrong direction.
I think you should have been like the season opener guest. I've never heard such a take to say cybersecurity is moving towards like the big pharma mindset. Because I mean, I think what you're saying there is big pharma makes their profits, makes their money off of servicing these drugs and reacting. They're not really solving the problem, which maybe that's food, maybe that's whatever that is, right? But they're making their profits off of reacting to a problem instead of just solving the problem from happening. So that is quite the hot take. How often do you use that analogy, or was that just on the fly?
I use it quite a bit. I watched, if the audience has not seen it, I think it's on Netflix, the Oxycontin documentary. Watch that, right? It's kind of that mindset. And so when I saw that, I was like, and I've been using the big pharma thing for a while, but that just hammered it home that, God, we are not focused enough on solving the problem. Like one thing I'll say about our customer base, as we get customers, we don't get SMB customers that come to us, hey, Corey, we want to do security because we know we should and we don't want to stop getting hacked. They wait till after they get hacked and then call us up and like, we just got hacked. How can we stop this from ever happening again? Well, if you put the right things in place, there you go. The only thing that makes them actually spend money on cybersecurity, and I get it, if you're a small business, I get it. But the only thing that makes them spend money is compliance requirements, insurance requirements, third-party risk management. They're going to spend money on cybersecurity to meet those requirements first so they can grow their business. Again, I get it, but it is not because they know they need to be secure, right? So we have to change that mindset.
Now, that is awesome, and I love the shout out to CIS. I saw Rich give a big old smile there. So when you talk about everything we're doing right now is wrong, that's quite the bold and blanket statement, which I know you can kind of back with your experience. But how does CIS play a role in your conversations, and are they helping customers understand that why everything is wrong today?
Yeah. What I love about the CIS and why we adopted it as a company, as the benchmark, is that if you looked at all the compliance frameworks, and I've done them all, whether they SOC 2, NIST, ISO, FedRAMP, CMMC, all of them, right? They're mostly kind of asking the same stuff over and over again. And then if you look at like NIST, depending on which one you look at, it's 160 something controls, and some go up to 200 something controls. It's insane. And if you look at some of the security questionnaires, I've seen some have gotten 100-page security questionnaire before, but it goes back to the basics. And what I love about the CIS, and if you're ever presenting to executives, they just want to know, hey, are we secure? What's the status of our program? And to start with, all right, if you got 20 controls, now it's 18, then it's easy to just look, all right, here are the 18 categories you need to have locked down. And then you can, and what's also great about it, now you have the implementation groups, IG 1, 2, and 3. And for an SMB, all right, you focus on IG 1, right? And if you need to get a little bit further, maybe go to 2, but it's very easy and digestible. And so what we've done in our platform, and when we present to executives, is we're able to say is a quick little bar chart. All right, vulnerability management, either you're red or you're green, or you're kind of yellow in the middle. But to be secure, and people need to realize this, and I'll tie back to compliance in a second, you need to be able to assess, remediate, and maintain, okay? And on a continuous basis. So that's what CIS is requesting, and that's what finally you've got PCI and you've got NIST. There's like in SOC 2, it has to be continuous. It's crazy to me that they were not requiring continuous, previously. Like you take PCI, like, oh, do a quarterly scan and that's it, right?
As long as it's good in this moment, nothing else matters, right?
Exactly. As if the hackers are only trying to hack you once a quarter, right? They wait until you do your scan or your quarterly pen test, and then you fix it, hopefully. And then once you fix it, then they're going to try to hack you, and then they can't get in. That's not the real world.
No.
Hackers are trying to hack you like literally every second. If you look at logs for your router or firewall, every single second. Yeah, it's continuous. So cybersecurity has to be continuous. So when I say we are broken, if the mindset was do a one-time assessment or one-time compliance requirement without requiring it to be continuous security, then you're going to always get hacked in that scenario. And last example I'll give, the other kind of analogy is when you leave your car, you always close and lock the door, right? But let's just say you want to use a detect and respond strategy for your car, okay? All right. So that means you're not going to lock your door and make sure your windows are up and everything is closed. You're going to leave it open. But when somebody jumps in your driver's seat, then you get an alert. And that's when you're like, so you detected it. Now you got to go respond and get that person out your driver's seat.
What takes more time, to just lock your doors and close the windows, or to have someone physically respond, or that automated software respond and force someone to look at an alert? Like I want to take that example and of course relate it back to this concept of proactive versus reactive. Is there money to be saved by taking these proactive steps?
Oh, 1000%. And so I get companies asking me all the time, well, Corey, you've got almost 100 customers, and that's over 10,000 employees under management with multiple solutions. You must have a humongous SOC. Well, not really, Zach. Here's the deal. Think about if I'm driving down the street and I see your house, Zach, and your garage door is up, and you got the Porsche in the driveway and sitting there, and I look in the garage, I say, wow, you got a lot of expensive stuff, and your side gate's open. Then when it becomes nighttime, and everybody else says their doors and windows, everything is locked down in their house. When it comes nighttime, whose house am I going to come after? It's yours, right? So when you think about a security program, if you have vulnerability management, continually scanning and patching, if you have your systems hardened and locked down, if you have endpoint protection configured to block, not detect and respond, and you have a 24/7 SOC watching a lockdown endpoint, and you have multi-factor, all these things in place, then guess what? Hacking is, I call it, it's like drive-by, hacking happens a lot. So literally they're just scanning the internet. And they're going to see, all right, who is vulnerable? Who's going to fall for this exploit? Who's going to click on this link? And when they click on that link, and I love that you mentioned browser, a lot of people don't realize that, number one, they screw up their MFA configuration, and that gets bypassed. But when that happens, when you click on that link, though, it's going to a domain that is just usually been brought up within a few days to a week. Okay. And if that gets blocked, you don't ever get a chance to even put in your credentials into a fake website and let it get stolen, like what happens in these typical phishing attacks. So it's fairly simple to stop these attacks. So no, we don't have 100 employees looking at screens. We just close the doors, lock all the windows for all of our customers. And to date, knock on wood, none have had a ransomware, none have had a major breach. We blocked 853 ransomware attacks in the last
That's
year.
awesome.
Wow.
Okay, none have executed. It literally is not that hard if you just close your door and put a lock on it. Now you have to lock it.
And Zach, you asked about saving money by doing these defensive measures. I just read something earlier this week. The average cost of a breach these days is over $2 million now. I think it's like $2.3 million is the average cost. And, that might be larger companies than a small and medium business, but the expense is real. And, to bring in someone like Corey's team to clean up the mess and then do the remediation. So, to close the doors and the windows and, and whatever reputational damage, it's
going to cost a lot more.
Exercise. It's real money.
So Rich, here's the deal with this. So what we've done here, and this is really, really disruptive. You can go to our website and say, oh, I need multi-factor endpoint, vulnerability management, security awareness training, et cetera, et cetera. Pricing's right there. You literally can buy on the website. And so it ends up being cheaper. We're talking about price. It's cheaper than going to, say, a MSP or whatever that has to go and buy through some other, reseller, distributor, or whatever. And they're getting sometimes not the best of breed products that they may not know how to configure. So here we are, best products, know how to configure, pricing transparent. It is cheaper. So to answer that pricing question.
Tell us more about that, Corey. That's interesting. So,
and I want one clarity, Rich. Again, a lot of our audience today is MSPs. That's really where Senteon and Rich really work our day to day. Now, clarify for us. I know you're not necessarily an MSP, not really a traditional MSP, but you also service MSPs as your customer. So could you kind of clear that up for us? Thank you.
Yeah, that's important. So think of it this way. We are cybersecurity as a service. We do not do IT. Okay. And so our customers, especially our bigger customers, they have MSPs. The MSPs are doing the IT component, and they're a huge help for us. And we actually work very well because it takes a lot of the burden off of the MSP. They're getting these advanced cybersecurity attacks, come against these SMBs. And let me clarify that. So what people need to realize is that the same attacks that are being levied against larger companies because you can automate it, leverage AI, et cetera, they're being sent against these small companies.
Oh, yeah.
And the hackers know that the small companies usually don't have a lot in place. And so the MSPs, the ones that we are working with today, they're being overwhelmed with the cybersecurity requirements that their companies are asking because they're getting these third-party questionnaires, they're getting all these extra things that they may not have expertise into. So if they're already partnered with a Cybertar, then we're handling that piece. And that also means that Cybertar doesn't have to do the IT stuff. Like, oh, my system is slowing down. I don't know why. And those type
Can't
of level.
Print. There's a dozen things. MSPs are very strapped for resources to handle the IT side alone. But when you toss on the security, it sounds like a really good opportunity for MSPs that are maybe struggling with resource allocation to potentially have a discovery call with you.
And you guys bring in that laser focus right on security, up to date, best tools. So that's really exciting, Corey. I love that.
Yeah. Two other things we add on is we have insurance partnerships, so flat fee insurance for all of our customers, so they know exactly what insurance costs for them. And then we have compliance partnerships, so we've mapped not just to the CIS, but we've mapped all of our solutions to every single compliance framework. Because again, to be NIST or ISO, you got to apply patches, you got to have a vulnerability management program, you got to have multi-factor, et cetera. So they're all asking the same stuff. So that's what.
I love your description earlier. And working at CIS, obviously we promote the CIS framework, controls framework. But if someone pulls me aside and says, which framework should I use? I'm clearly going to tell them the CIS controls because of the implementation groups and so forth. But, at the end of the day, you just need to follow something. And Corey, I love your approach because let's say an organization needs to comply to NIST for whatever their requirements are, regulatory or otherwise. A lot of those people will actually go down the CIS implementation group path and then just do those mappings because it's easier to follow. It's more logical. It's kind of has a logical start and finish, and a framework that's easy to measure and follow. So even I find, but people, if they have to comply to some other framework, they'll actually use ours and just do mappings through a solution that like you bring to the market, Corey.
Yeah, one piece I'll note is the Nevada Gaming that came out a couple years ago, but their requirement says that you have to have a framework. It doesn't say which one. It
Yeah.
just says have a framework. And so we work with several Las Vegas casinos as customers, and we said let's use CIS. And so we've used CIS in IG1, and it is a simple framework. Again, and what I love about it is I can do it whether it be a PowerPoint or just in our platform. It's 18 bars, but it's really hard because some of them just have like you got like the NIST or CFF. They're like 5 or 6 kind of categories, but it's too big, right?
You don't know where to start.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what a lot of companies are using just for a simple framework, and that's the best thing about CIS.
Yep.
That's really awesome to hear.
And I will add, even from CIS, all the frameworks are good. And Corey, you said it. They're all going after the same kinds of things. I mean, there's each of them have just a little bit of a different approach and maybe a little more emphasis in particular areas, but they're all good. You just make sure you pick one and just get after it and make sure it's CIS. I'm kidding.
That's really good. And I want to circle back because I think something you really bring unique to the table. You talked about presenting to C-levels and talking about security, but let's not ignore you were, I believe, the chief customer officer for Cylance, which was obviously an incredible company acquired by BlackBerry. Tell us more about how you talk about security to customers. Is it really focusing on the technical aspects of the solution, or how do you bridge the conversation to people who maybe don't understand security?
And Corey, I want to let you know I'm super excited to hear this because I worked at CIS Computer Solutions, if you ever remember them.
Yeah, you guys were a partner.
Yeah, we sold Cylance. I sold a ton of Cylance. I love selling Cylance. That was a really hot solution for a long time. It was good stuff.
Wow, small world. I love it. So I'm gonna hit that question, Zach, from a couple angles. When you talk about chief customer officer, most companies they'll add in they have a product and then they have customer success. Okay.
Yes.
And so at Cylance, originally I didn't have customer success and support. I had the implementation of the services team, the managed services, and also incident response. So what would happen is you take the value prop of Cylance. It was, hey, we prevent cyber attacks. We prevent malware from executing. We brought AI really to market. Well, a few lessons learned along that path. Number one, and this is one of my favorite stories. I've probably said it a few times, but a pretty well-known CISO friend of mine, and he was one of the early beta testers of Cylance in 2014. He calls me up and he's like, Corey, man, love you, but you guys you're blocking winword.exe. I see it here in your platform. You're blocking winword.exe. I had to let it run. And I was like, you sure? Okay. And I logged in. I looked at it, and it was winword.exe blocked, but it was in system 32, and it was not digitally signed by Microsoft. And I was like, okay. It had the little Windows logo thing next to it too.
Really pretty.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, this isn't WinWord.exe. It's not in program files like Microsoft, et cetera, et cetera. And we researched it. It was a keylogger, but he had allowed that to run throughout his organization. Okay. And so the expectation that whether it be, and I'll call out CISA and I'll call out all these compliance, regulations, that these small to medium-sized businesses are going to know how to identify a piece of malware, know how to implement these tools properly, is absolutely absurd. Okay. Because most of them that are required to be SOC 2 and NIST and ISO compliant, et cetera, they don't have a CISO and a security team. And so when I learned this, and I really, focus in on the problem, because we also had companies that when they would first buy the product and then they buy service, we would come in, get them locked down and secure, really really tight on all their endpoints. 6 months later, they had undone it. They bought a bunch of new
Yep.
computers, hired new people, and those weren't secured at all. And then they call up to the support line. We just got hacked. You guys are supposed to stop these attacks. Then we can look at their instance in our console. We can see, well, you disabled all the preventative stuff. We
Yep.
saw the malware. You just let it execute, and that's how you got compromised. Now, in the middle of a compromise, nobody wants to hear that it's their fault. Okay,
No,
so
it's
so
your fault.
yeah, exactly. Because you said you would stop it. So what I did after that is I built a managed service called Silence Guard. So you don't have to buy the product or the service, and it is continuous. It is just a subscription. And so when I did that, then our customers got secure and stayed secure. And so when you think about customer success and what customers need, and I preach this to our teams even internally here at Savitar, is that you really have two customers, at least two customers. So I had a real world scenario at Silence where the CISO and the executive team called up pissed. And they were like, Silence is not solving this. You guys aren't providing value what we thought you would. And I pulled up their executive report card that we've been sending to them every single month. But we were sending it to the technical lead. Guess what the technical lead was not doing? Forwarding it to the executive team. and I pulled this up and I said, you guys are 98% in prevention across your 1,500 endpoints.
Yep.
You're really, really good shape right now. I'm curious, what is the concern? And they're like, we've never seen this before. Wow, this is amazing. We're doing really good. Oh my God. And so it's you got to realize that being chief customer officer and customer success, just to summarize, large product companies, cybersecurity companies might not need a customer success team if they had
Sure.
a services team. Okay. If they had a services team, you buy the product, services implements it, manages and maintains it, and keeps it to a lockdown optimal state, then you don't need customer success because they're already there and it's on a continuous plane of being secure. Right.
Okay.
Now, what a lot of companies have is they'll have their product and say, oh, our product's amazing. It's so easy to use. They can use it. Well, maybe for half of them, but most of them aren't going to fully implement it. And every IT and cybersecurity person I know has 20 jobs.
Yep.
And so they're not going to maintain that product appropriately. So you have to have it, in my opinion, subscriptions and continuous cybersecurity is the only way to do it. So bringing services and customer success all together into a solution is the way to do it. And that's ultimately what I did at Silence is I made it into one solution to where I minimize the need for that customer success team. And so you take where we are today, our company, Savitar, we have a member experience team and we have our technical team, and everything is all subscriptions to solve the problem.
I'm curious to elaborate a little bit further. Obviously, Silence had a massive scale, and your one example company, you shared 1,500 endpoints. A lot of the MSPs that listen to the show and that I work with, their entire client base is made up of, let's just say 30 customers, but only a grand total of maybe 2,000 endpoints. So a much smaller scale. For businesses like this, how would you advise for them to handle this success, technical management? Should they have a director of customer chief, right? Or is that something more mature to look at in the future? How would you advise the smaller MSP?
Yeah, great question. And I'll caveat this with I'm not an expert in the MSP
Sure.
business, but what I have seen is that the margins are tight and it's competitive, and so when you add in these extra bodies, then the cost increases. And SMBs are highly cost sensitive, right? And so it's a hard balance. But here's what's happening, and I think it's being tipped in another direction here. If that MSP, and there's a survey done, I was just talking to a marketing firm that they're going to release this, but it's pretty interesting. An MSP, even if that customer has been with them 15, 20 years, okay, and love them, great relationship. But if there is a company that could bring cybersecurity and really good cybersecurity, stop them from getting hacked, help them with insurance and compliance, et cetera, and have the IT piece, they would switch from that company, that MSP that has been great for them for the last 15 years,
Really?
to this newer company. Yes, that's what the survey showed. So, there is a need today for this higher level of service. And so the MSPs have to figure out a way to bridge that gap. A lot of them, you'll look at them, they have cybersecurity capabilities, but they're using their existing knowledge and tool sets. And that may end up meaning that they're using the Microsoft suite. And so
Sure.
they'll go in and they'll say, hey, use all Microsoft, use Defender and Microsoft phishing, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, I'm not a proponent of using one vendor. So say if that
Yes.
one vendor gets compromised, then you're screwed. So that's why we have chosen best of breed across every single category. Okay. And I think that's where the gap, is, because these MSPs, they're stuck with their knowledge and expertise level. And if they just know Microsoft or know
Yep.
some of the lower level kind of IT MSP kind of products, because that's a different
Hmm.
market. Like
It
the
is a
enterprise,
different market. That's a
yeah,
very good point to call out there. I mean, that's one of the reasons we built Senteon. It's designed with an enterprise mindset, but made for MSPs, right? There's not a lot of security vendors that one, even know about the managed service provider, or know the challenges they have, or know what it takes to design a solution for that market. So MSPs will take an enterprise solution and try to piece it together, right? So
yeah,
awesome on you to be aware of this space and to recognize that challenge and just shout it out on the show.
Corey,
mhm,
can we drill down that on that just a little bit further? Let's say I'm an MSP and I want to bring you in to handle security for my customers. How do we structure that relationship? Do I benefit from bringing you in as an MSP?
yeah, yeah. We have a few things. We have a referral. Say if you're an MSP and you're like, hey, my customer is asking all this advanced cybersecurity stuff. We don't have the expertise. We could try to sell it. And here's what's really important. I want MSPs to think about this. And it's interesting to see how we end up acquiring customers. They have an existing MSP, then they have a breach, and then the MSP doesn't have the expertise sometimes
Sure.
to explain what happened, or how to prevent it from happening again. Okay. And that leaves that SMB concerned. They're like, all right, we need something else. They don't know what it is. And so I don't think it's fair to those MSPs to be held to that standard, to be able to have to have enterprise grade cybersecurity and expertise, because those are kind of attacks again that are being levied against these SMBs. So it's quite the conundrum, right?
Hmm.
But if the MSP were to say, all right, here are the things that we know we're good at, because and then partner with a Cybertar, if they introduce in a partnership, their customers to Cybertar, they're going to get a 20% referral of that. Okay. And what we've seen is, that we've had some MSPs or even a VC. So, one use his Cybertar, we call it side hustle program. So you can go to our website and partners and side hustle,
I like
right?
that.
Yeah, to get that 20%. And it ended up being that he used that as a down payment on his house. Okay. So the 20% ends up being a lot, especially as some of these companies start to really grow. So that'd
That's
be the
great,
way.
Corey. That's excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that just to really summarize that, MSPs are very good at handling that IT, and a lot of times they are good at handling that security. But if you are an earlier stage MSP, having partners in place, whether that's a trusted security vendor or something where a managed security, cybersecurity as a service offering, like these types of partnerships help you build that relationship with your customer. You're not leaving revenue on the table, you're better at servicing your customer, right?
It
So
sounds like a
really
business
love that.
accelerator.
Hmm.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'll give one last real quick example, because this is a call I'm having today. It's a smaller company in the Midwest, and they're reaching out to trying to find a better cybersecurity provider. And they said, we have a quote, from an MSP. They didn't give me the price. They just gave me the scope. And the scope was leveraging, a lot of the Cisco secure stack, and bringing in, routers and switches and
Yeah.
firewalls and Cisco VPN. And the
That's the only
conversation,
thing that they know.
that's what they know, right? Exactly. So the conversation I'm gonna have with them, in a couple of hours is, okay, what if we move to a ZTNA type of architecture? right? Moved everything to the cloud, probably is in the cloud. And sounds like they're using cloud resources already,
Mhm.
and they may not have a need to have all this local infrastructure. They could just have wireless and move to zero trust. Okay. And so then the MSP has to just manage that environment. But that's what the customer is going to ultimately need to get to, is more of a zero trust type of environment, move to the cloud. And there's a lot of zero trust type of VPN solutions that can easily be implemented for that customer. And in the last piece, why it's important that MSPs have to think about is the digital transformation that is happening. That's what most of these SMBs want to do. Then if the MSPs aren't getting into that space and getting up to speed with zero trust type of architectures, then they're going to start losing potential customers. And some of that stuff I would happily push off to the MSP to do, right? But I would love to have a MSP partner to do the zero trust, digital transformation and manage those pieces while we're just handling just the cybersecurity piece. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to partner in the future.
I do love that, and thanks for the deep dive on not only your background and your company. So love what you're doing. I do want to pull up our first slide here with the MITRE attack techniques, but instead of addressing these directly, I do have one more just kind of like facilitating question that I'm curious your input on. And just as a
Yep.
reminder, we're going to be diving into the educational aspect of these CIS benchmark settings. I do believe we have about 12 settings today, if I remember right. So we will be managing our time appropriately. But you mentioned something earlier in your introduction. We've blocked, I think, 386 ransomware attacks or some number you shared. You blocked them. You didn't
Yeah.
react to them and you didn't stop them as they were locking machines, right? You blocked them. So I'm curious, how how are you explaining that to the customer? Do they just believe you like, hey, you blocked it because I have this least privilege in place, because I have these hardened settings in place? Like, how are they actually understanding that you did something? And if you want to tie that back into kind of this trend you're seeing with attacks on the rise with CVEs, I'd love for you to kind of address both of those.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'll give a real customer case study. So back in the fall, we had a company that was using a pretty decent sized MSP, and I knew of them, and we'd also discussed partnering. And here's how the conversation went with partnering. I asked, well, what are you guys doing for endpoint? And they said, hey, we have Sentinel-1, and we have a few other products, but Sentinel-1 is one we use. I said, oh, okay, cool. So do you configure Sentinel-1 to block the execution of malware and have like a 24/7 SOC behind that? Then it's like the guy, he was on more of the sales partner side, like, no, we don't know how to do that. No, we just installed the agent. And I was like, well, but your SMB customers don't, you're not configuring to actually block malware, ransomware, etc. And they're like, no, we don't have the expertise. I was like, okay. And so this customer came to it. It was actually one of their customers. I didn't know at the time, but they came to us and said, hey, we had a ransomware attack, and our current MSP didn't know how to configure it and block ransomware. Whereas every one of our customers, it is pre-configured to block ransomware, and we have a 24/7 SOC monitoring that. So what ends up happening is when you think about blocking ransomware, malware, etc., it is just knowing how to configure it properly. And going back to the WinWord.exe example, and I've had 14 years in endpoint background. So I was at McAfee for 8 years and Silence for 6 years. So I've been around this a long time. So it comes down to configuring it properly. And most MSPs don't have that extensive of an endpoint and malware and AI background to manage it and have a 24/7 SOC to secure them. So my point to MSPs is we can partner on some of these opportunities, because it could be scary for them, because I think they may end up losing more and more customers if they're not actually stopping these attacks. Because if I have an MSP doing my IT and security and then I get compromised, then I'm gonna start looking. So that's how we address the endpoint problem.
Yeah.
And the other one, I'll show you, I'll share my screen, but I'll just show
Yeah, and
that.
we can pull that slide up as well.
Yeah, this stat just blows my mind here. Me,
And I'll just
I,
kind of address this while you're pulling this up. Oh, there
yeah,
we go.
okay,
A lot of these settings, we'll talk about the impairing defenses and authentication process. The settings we discuss are going to be really diving into how these settings, if in place, will better mitigate those attacks. But first, we'll get this slide up here, Corey, as soon as you got it.
Actually, I'll just talk about it.
Okay,
So,
cool.
super simple. So, everybody knows what a CVE is, common vulnerability and exploit. MITRE tracks those, been tracking it for the last 20 something years or so. So, with that being the case, I just remember back in the early 2000s, maybe it was maybe 1,000 new vulnerabilities came out per year, maybe, right? And you got your Melissa, your I love you, all those back in the day, right? That cause harm. Well, those were the days when we were doing your yearly pen test, kind of yearly security assessment on that cadence. And it kind of made sense. If you only had 1,000 vulnerabilities coming out in a year, um, cool, right? And then you're not going to have that many. All are not going to apply to your environment. Well, fast forward to 2023. 2023, there were almost 29,000. There were 28,900 vulnerabilities that came out last year. Okay. So what does that mean? You're having almost 80 per day, new vulnerabilities coming out, 3 per hour. Okay. So if you do not have a hardened environment or a continuous patching program, and you're still doing a patch Tuesday type of mindset,
Mm-hmm.
you will be compromised. Like it's just inevitable because there's another exploit that's coming, literally every single day. And so you have to have a continuous patching cadence. And that's what we've done with our platform, and we've automated it. And that's what's changed in cybersecurity. When I talk about we still kind of have this legacy mindset, we stopped doing pen testing. Pen testing is free for our customers, okay? Because if I do a pen test today, and then tomorrow another 80 vulnerabilities come out, and again, not all will apply to the environment, but again, some will. Then within a few days, that pen test is obsolete, right?
Yep.
Because you think about the pen test, you after the pen test, you still have to go and do the remediation. You still got to fix those vulnerabilities. And so you do a pen test, fix the vulnerabilities. By the time you fix the vulnerabilities, you have a ton of new vulnerabilities have come out, and so you're just behind. That's like again using your house analogy. Like you walk out your house, you close your door, but then your kids come out 10 more times and leave it open. Yeah,
My favorite was the key to lock your house also unlocks every other house on the block. You have the default locks on your door. I loved that when I heard it last week from our guest.
yes. So that's what we have to change our mindset. And I feel like we're still kind of stuck in the mindset of, hey, let's do this one-time pen test, apply patches once a month or whatever the cadence is. That won't work today. Because it's not like the hackers, like I said, they're trying to hack you once a month, once a quarter. They're trying to hack you every single day. So if a new vulnerability, critical vulnerability that can't be exploited comes out today, hackers are starting to exploit it today. Okay,
Mhm.
that's it. And I'm not even talking about 0 days. And the last point I'll share is that people have to think about is um, your mobile phones. Used to be the Apple, snob that where I would just sit there and say, oh, well, I got Apple, I got a Mac, I'm good, right?
Not the
I'm sure
case
we all heard
anymore.
that. Well, I mean, if you look at how many attacks are being levied against, the iPhone in particular, and you'll see every single time, it's about every 3 weeks, there's a new vulnerability, new
There was a
critical
big one
vulnerability.
last week.
It was just last week, absolutely. And if you are not patching them or updating your iOS, you will be exploited. So we are the next month launching mobile threat defense. So not just endpoint, but mobile threat defense is coming. So that'll be a new launch that's coming. But these are we have to catch up. That's why I
Yep.
say we're so far behind as a cybersecurity industry, and things are moving so much more faster. They have 29,000 vulnerabilities coming out. It's just a bigger attack surface. So we have to change the way we do things.
A bigger attack surface that can be reduced by these proactive setting changes, these continuous
Yes.
patching. It's all about reducing it. And before we dive into the educational portion of today, and like I said, we have about 12 settings, I want to emphasize continuous patching, absolutely critical, no disagreements there. But what we're talking about in this webinar series is hardening, which is slightly different. These are just static choices that CIS has already done the research. CIS has already recommended, and these recommendations very rarely change. I think the password length has maybe changed since the different versions, but overall, these 1,000+ settings that we talk about in this weekly webinar series are going to be the same today as they are next year, right? They will never be more safe to allow the setting we're talking about in this episode. So Very, very good explanation. Good bow on the proactive and the importance of these hardened settings. So with all that, let's dive into the first setting. All right. So the first one here, Corey, allow remote shell access is set to disabled. Anything with the words remote and shell sounds horrible to me. But Corey, could you kind of introduce what this setting is and why it's recommended to have disabled?
Like, this is so scary. Like, Zach, tell me, why is this not disabled by default? Like, I just
Whew.
don't get it.
I will be happy to toss my opinion on that. I think Rich probably has his own opinion, but Windows is made for usability. They
Yeah.
don't want you to ever reach out to Microsoft saying they can't do something. So all of this comes available to you and the bad actors.
It's a feature, Zach. We call that a feature.
Well, you consider it's 2024. Like, remote shells should absolutely be disabled by default, period. But if it's not by default, you cannot have your Windows systems with remote shell on it, because it's essentially what that is. You take your command prompt. If our users ever get to your command prompt, and if you're savvy enough, you can do everything in Windows from
Yes.
command prompt. Okay. And so being able to access that remotely and it not being disabled to me, it should be a crime, in my opinion.
Yeah,
And I imagine this would help with,
an end user doesn't know how to use this stuff typically, right? But
Yes,
hackers do.
yes,
and I imagine this could help a bad actor take a user profile, escalate their privileges. I mean, this is really just, if you know how to use it, you can do anything you want, right?
yeah,
Awesome.
100%.
All right. And I love Rich's point. You know, these settings that may be available, most of the time, hell, I don't know if you can say 9 times out of 10, that end client is going to have no idea that they lost access to this feature.
Zero impact. It's not something they're looking for in general.
Yep. All right.
Yeah,
Let's go over to this. Mhm.
the other point I'll make really quickly is that
Yep.
IT folks that do know how to use remote shell, I'll challenge to say by default it still needs to be disabled by on theirs as well. Here's why. When you look at what was happening with some of the hacks, nowadays, take MGM, and you even take the Sony Pictures hack and some of the other Sony hacks, they're going after the IT people, because I can go online, figure out, okay, who's the IT administrator for this company.
Sure,
That means this
LinkedIn.
person, they have the keys to the kingdom. Okay. And if this person's posting on social media, hey, I'm traveling to New York or whatever, you know what they're doing. So you can send a spear phishing attack. And a lot of this OSANT stuff is automated now to send something specifically to them and target them. And so if you have keys to the kingdom, then you are a specific target. And that's what IT folks need to realize.
Yep.
I like that.
Absolutely. And if you need that setting to perform your remote shell, I mean, chances are if you're an MSP and you are doing things the right way, there's a lot better ways to be executing the process you need than leveraging a setting like that. So, all right, let's go to this next setting here. Allow clipboard sharing with Windows Sandbox is set to disabled. So again, high level, if you could kind of introduce Windows Sandbox, I believe it's like this isolated area, but why don't we want the ability to use clipboard in the sandbox?
Yeah, I mean, these are taking me back way back when I was back at Foundstone doing pen testing, and clipboard and vulnerabilities were rampant, and we were exploiting them, and even then at the time. Again, this is just not needed. Like, no one
Mhm.
even knows that this capability is there. But again, for someone to be able to, again, it goes back to the attack surface. Everything that is enabled, that means that it can potentially be exploited and used as an attack. So it should be disabled by default. So it's just, again, an unneeded setting. I'm not even gonna dive deeper into it.
Absolutely. I mean, those clipboards can absolutely be taken advantage of. Let's go over to this next one here. So allow networking in Windows Sandbox to disabled. Again, this sandbox is this isolated, secure area, or at least intended to be. So if that gets compromised, that can be a very critical issue. But why do we not want to allow networking in the sandbox?
So let's say you're in the sandbox and you export the previous one, you get in, and then now you can communicate with other devices via IP and launch attacks potentially with it using networking. Again, that's just a double whammy on top of it.
Yep. And that, I mean, that's lateral movement, and everything the bad actor wants to do becomes more accessible, easier for them to
Becomes
do.
realized.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. This next one here is prevent users from modifying settings. So this one is set to enabled, which does mean not to allow this. This does sound like it could get a little end client disruptive. If I'm reading that correctly, could you tell us why we don't want users to be allowed to change settings here?
Yeah, I'll equate this to local admin, letting users have local admin. And it's a hard thing to overcome if they've already had that access. But what I have seen is, companies, when they start day one and local admin is not enabled and users can't go in and modify and change the wrong settings. So literally with this one, you can go and lock down a system and then the
Mm-hmm.
user can go in and unlock themselves, right? And get themselves compromised. So you don't want that to happen. And what I tell companies all the time, especially small and medium-sized businesses, when you think about a lot of them have these BYOD devices, okay? And so and they're like, hey, a lot of our employees have their own computers. What should we do? I was like, let me explain to you how third-party risk management works, okay? And I did a video just on this the other day. So American Express got hacked, okay? But if you look at it, American Express themselves, who have, as
Yes.
far as I've seen, a fantastic security team, they didn't get hacked themselves. One of their suppliers, one of their third parties got hacked that had access to the data. Okay. And so when you have those type of configurations, like allowing them to change settings, and if that small company, I'm not sure who it was, they if their users were BYOD or whatever, then not just that company's security has been compromised, but now American Express's companies, been compromised. So you have to have lockdown systems. You cannot allow BYOD, and that needs to be implemented across SMBs as well. I think that's the gap. Again, the expectation that your third party is going to have the same level of security that American Express does. But American Express and all these large companies, they're dependent on these smaller third parties to do something. And that's the same thing going back 10 years ago. That was a Target hack. Target didn't get
Mm-hmm.
hacked. Phasio Mechanical got hacked. Okay,
Mhm, mhm.
refrigeration company, right? And so I'll be willing to bet that this setting for phasio mechanical. um,
We don't need to call out anyone on this webinar series here, Corey.
I mean, this is all public information, but I couldn't imagine they had a comprehensive hardening and security program, and that's just not realistic for small medium-sized businesses
Well,
to have.
it's interesting, and a couple of things that you've called out specifically, Corey, are things that we are doing very specifically at CIS. One is zero trust. You brought that up.
Yeah.
The folks need to be doing zero trust and so forth. We're at zero trust now at CIS, which is exciting for us. And the other thing is BYOD.
Hmm.
CIS's policy on BYOD is no BYOD. It's exactly what you just described. So you've hit upon a number of points in just in your general comments that are things that we actually do at CIS as part of our infrastructure. So it's good on you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we do have about 5 settings, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into what Rich was saying here and your response as well. You talked about the third party risk, right? No one's going to have the security posture that American Express does, right? That's quite the goal. If that is your goal as an MSP, like good for you. I hope you get there, but it's going to be hard, right? But this third party risk management, do you believe, and if you do, kind of elaborate, but is your third party risk mitigated or lessened by having hardened settings in place and enforced at your business?
Yeah, I mean, when we met Zach and you explained what you guys have done, I was like, oh my God, like where have you been all my life? I literally have I'm really dating myself going back into I think it was like 2001 when I had to get a company DISCAP certified. It was still called DISCAP at the time, and had to go through the STIGs and actually apply all these hardening configurations.
You are
And
dating yourself here.
Nightmare.
yeah, exactly. There was no Senteon, and so
Yeah.
guess what? I had this one brilliant guy who wrote a script, And so we had to run this hardening script on all these systems to make sure they could pass the stakes requirement and get them DISCAP, certified. And so, there's, as far as I've known, there's never been a solution to just harden a whole environment the way you guys have, because there's so many.
And continuous, and keeping those, having that visibility and that continuous look, as well as alerting on all that stuff for the, to make sure it's not a point in time solution. That's what I love about Senteon too.
Yeah. So what you guys are doing is game changing. I think everyone should have that in place. It just needs to be a standard thing.
You'd think it would be, man, but hey, every company's got to start somewhere, and I really appreciate the shout out for what we're doing, because it really is this forgotten area. There's things that are always talked about, and even talked about in this episode, right? The CVEs with vulnerability management, there's patch management, but this concept of hardening management is kind of touching on both areas, but it's completely forgotten. So I'm really appreciative that you see us as filling that gap and actually servicing a need. But yeah, thank you for that. All right, this next setting here, we'll go no auto restart with logged on users for scheduled automatic updates installation is set to disabled. So this is saying it will auto restart whether you're logged in or not, because this update does need to take place. Again, these GPOs are a lot of times hard to read. I've even gotten them wrong on air. So, but Corey, why do we want these auto restarts to happen no matter what?
Because we're dealing with humans. Okay. Yeah.
You could tell me, remind me later, might be clicked for months and years.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Within our customer base, our standard is you got 4 times, and then that's it, right? Because if you keep waiting, then another 80 new vulnerabilities are excuse me. I'll say it again. Yeah, thank you. But if you keep waiting, if you wait every single day, another 80 new vulnerabilities come out, right?
Or what if it's a 0 day?
It's a 0 day, exactly. Yeah, and you take these 0 days, these your log4j type of vulnerabilities, and all these things that are being actively exported on a continuous basis. You have to get your systems updated, or else, to your point, Rich, it's going to cost you a ton more money after the incident has happened. So just a reboot is not that bad of a thing. I think we got to get it into our psyche that rebooting is not a bad thing. And as long as it's scheduled, like my computer is set every single night, 7 p.m. If there's an update, I'm rebooting. Usually, unfortunately, I'm still working at that time. But I see it come up and like, I got to do it.
Yep. And it doesn't take that long, right? I think I saw a good LinkedIn post about like the Chrome browser update. It's like click here and it automatically relaunches. It puts all your tabs back. Like Chrome does a great job of their updates. But I mean, it's restarting your computer at the same time. And in that same scenario, if you restart your machine, usually Chrome will remember your tabs, right? You're not losing that much productivity. If you generate that much value in 3 minutes, then hey, you're breaking the narrative, and maybe you don't need to. No. But no, very, very good point of view, and thanks for sharing your internal best practice on your own machine.
Yes.
All right. This next one here, we talked about automatic updates in that last setting, but we do need these automatic updates to be enabled so that they can take place. At Senteon, we call kind of the last 2 settings and the settings to follow here group settings, because you can't have one without the rest. For example, if we did have this setting to be disabled, we wouldn't be able to enable the other settings because the overarching setting wasn't there to begin with. But Corey, we just talked about automatic updates, but again, is there anything else to add to this slide, why it's important to have automatic updates?
No, I'll just say this. I really think it just needs to be part of the way we think about using computers today. Applying patches, updating, using multi-factor. These are some things are just table stakes, and it just needs some re-education of our public users. Like, you think about it now, and I did a really great talk. One of my favorites, actually. It dates me as well, but if you guys were around when the seatbelt law came out, right? Okay, and it was like 1984-ish, right? And there's even one state, I think it's Delaware. It doesn't even require seatbelts, or is it New Hampshire? Maybe it's New Hampshire. Anyway, but we're gonna go on. But the bottom line is,
It's an accepted risk. They diagnosed it. They documented. They said, nah, seatbelts aren't worth it for our state.
that was hard. But the bottom line is, when the seatbelt law came out, guess what didn't happen? Nobody put their seatbelts on. Okay. And even though logically we knew that if you have a seatbelt on, you're not going to fly out the window, right? Yeah, I'm actually so happy to be alive right now, because I know in the 1970s, when my mom brought me home from the hospital, my dad was driving. She was probably in the passenger seat, and she's holding me, right? And so if we got into a car accident, baby Corey would have flown out the window. Okay.
Corey, I've got a good one for you, Corey. I'm date myself as well. I'm actually old. So
Yeah.
my mom actually drove a convertible Corvair, which was it goes back a ways. The Corvair was banned for safety reasons by Ralph Nader way back when. No seatbelts, no top, and just like three kids just running around in the car. That's what we used to ride around when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
Just,
now it is normal for us to put our seatbelts on. You wouldn't even think about it. And your kids are in
Yep.
a car seat, secured in the back, right?
Yep.
That is a normal thing. And if you look at someone that's not wearing a seatbelt, that does not have their kid in the car seat, it's like, what is
Right.
wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why can't that apply to cybersecurity? If you're not doing the patches and updating and rebooting your
What's wrong with
system
you?
using multi-factor, what is wrong with you? You will get.
I think this is a really good chance just to call out, right? The things and the trends that change in the security field, there's simple metaphors like the car seatbelt, right? It didn't take place at first. There was pushback, but as we shift that mindset as the top down, bottom up, right? It's going to take place and it's going to become normal, just like hardening the settings on your computer. So, all right, we do only have 3 minutes left and about 4 settings still. So Corey, a little bit of a rapid fire, and just to set expectations, I do expect us to run a little bit over. So this next setting here is making sure automatic updates are actually scheduled on the day they come out. So this is set to 0, which means every day. Corey, anything more you want to add on this one?
Yeah, I think one piece that I'm curious what your thoughts are, but we actually have it come and set to patch at least 2 days after, because if it's a bad patch, and I think that's maybe it's aging me, but back in the day we've had bad patches go out that have caused some problems in the past, and so if you wait a couple days, then everybody that has had that problem is probably going to experience it already, and then it gives you a little bit of leeway. So I do think there's a caveat to maybe 0 to 2, somewhere in there from a range perspective. So yeah,
Interesting.
Sure.
I like that.
And I do believe CIS, these are all just the best choice, top of the line, right?
Yep.
There's always ways to document. And I will note, CIS says, maybe in some of these settings, like maybe they do have 0 to 2, right? For example, with password length, it's 14 or higher. So you don't always have to be explicitly what CIS says. They do have alternative options that are still acceptable. So this very well could be one of those settings. I can't confirm that, but it could be. All right, next setting here. Remove access to pause updates feature is set to enabled. So as a user, an update starts. Why don't we want to allow them to pause it? Because they're super busy. Why would we stop them from doing that?
because it could be paused forever. They could keep on pausing.
It'll never happen.
And never patch. Yeah.
Yeah, no end user. It's like, hey, wait a minute. Let me just start that patch again. No one ever said that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. I think that really sums up this slide. This one's straightforward, right? There's going to be people who pause it and never go back to it.
Yep.
So, all right, cool. This next one here, manage preview builds is set to disabled. Corey, again, high level, could you introduce what this preview build means and why we don't want to allow the management of them?
Yeah, because it hasn't been fully baked yet. Right?
Yes.
They don't know what you're the guinea pig.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want your clients or your end user or your employees to be the guinea pig for these?
Yeah, it goes back to the 0 setting. At least maybe give it a couple of days, but this is even going even further, right? It is a preview. It may or may not work in your environment.
It's called asking for problems.
Yeah, exactly.
No, perfect. All right, and this next one here is select when preview builds and feature updates are received is set to, again, here's one of these examples, enabled to 180 or more, right? So we do want to make sure that these are available at a certain time frame. So tell us about this setting.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this could be subjective, with the 180. But for me, again, back to the preview bills, I wouldn't want it. Let it be fully baked, and then we'll implement it. But this gives you enough of a time. I would think within the 180 days, the actual build will come out.
Mm-hmm.
The valid one will come out, so it gives you enough time.
Yep, that's perfect. And the last setting for today, as we do hit right at the hour, select when quality updates are received. And this is going to be that enabled 0 days. So it does sound like, again, these settings, they're so entangled. There's over 1,000 settings that we talk about in this webinar series, right? And this one screams to me that there's different types of update settings, like this one called quality updates, right? Some of them are intertwined. Some of them are more important than others, right? It's all about understanding these settings and attending things like this to understand it. But explain to us why quality updates we want to be received more immediate as opposed to the others.
Yeah, I think the key word here is quality, right? You actually have a quality update. It implies that there's some that aren't quality.
Right.
That's spot on. So we want to make sure that these systems are staying secure and up to date is really the biggest thing. But yep, this was the episode. This was the last setting on the update settings in Windows Sandbox. So Corey, thank you for being an absolutely incredible guest. You've shared a lot of wisdom and a lot of insight, and I do want to give you one more chance if we can highlight you on the screen here. I love to hear your closing thoughts, any maybe trends you're seeing, anything you want to leave the audience on the topic, but the next minute or so is yours, man.
Yeah, well, I'll start out. I got to shout out to your background. I did not know you were a Saints fan. I'm from
I
Louisiana.
am.
I'm a big Saints fan. So
I lived 5 years in New Orleans, man. I will absolutely meet you out there any day of the week.
we got to schedule a game down there and then have get a box or something, whatever. But it's always a good time in New Orleans. I was born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana. So
Oh, nice.
I know the area well. The other thing I'll leave everybody with, and we talked about a lot here, is the days of us not doing cybersecurity have gone. Okay, because I'm really, really concerned about the future for us as it relates to cybersecurity. Because now the hackers are using AI. The hackers have automated and scripted everything you can possibly imagine. And here we are, and I'll talk, specifically about 99% of all businesses are small to medium-sized businesses, where the MSPs and Savitar services that market as well. But that's 32 million businesses in the United States alone that are specifically being targeted, and we feed to these larger companies, and we're seeing those types of attacks affect the larger companies, your Fortune 1000 or so. And so we have to secure our SMBs, which are essentially the supply chain in many cases for larger companies. This is leading to national security concerns. We still don't know what happened with the barge hitting the bridge, and potentially
Not going down that path, but yep.
yeah, exactly. But we have to figure this out. And when you think about cybersecurity and compliance and insurance, okay, all these things tie in together, and we have to solve them as a comprehensive, holistic solution. But the last point I will say is, we as a industry in the United States, as a government, we have to stop deluding ourselves and thinking, here are the best practices. Go do all these things, SMBs. You know exactly how to do it. No, you don't. They don't know how to do it. You can tell them how to do it, and they're still not going to do it because they don't have a resource to go and implement it. Right. So imagine, I'll give that. This will be my last analogy for the day. Analogies. But imagine you take your car to the dealer because you need to get a tune up, replace the spark plugs, et cetera, and you need a brake job. But instead, they charge you $5,000, but they don't actually replace your spark plugs, and they don't, replace your brakes. What they do is they give you a detailed description of why you need your brakes replaced and your spark plugs replaced, and a detailed description of how to do it yourself. That is a security assessment. Okay. So if you have companies paying for security assessments, they get a very detailed report of what is wrong and how to fix it yourself. You're not gonna go and do it. Okay.
Still don't know
So,
how
Corey,
to do
that's
this, right?
too good, and I'm gonna steal the crap out of that closing thought. That's
That and
too
big
funny.
pharma. I know you're going to crush it on big pharma, Zach. I'm going to need that one too.
yeah.
One thing that you did say in your closing thoughts, and I know we're 5 minutes over, but these big businesses, the top 1%, are being attacked, and now these SMBs are being hit by these automated attacks. Well, I always hear the good guys are always behind, and I'm here to kind of say, like, we are, right? We are always going to be behind. Senteon has been around only for a couple of years, but how long have GPOs been around? GPOs 20 years, 20 plus years, right? And it took us to develop a solution in 2022 to automate the hardening process. The bad actors had 22 years advantage until we came around to automate thousands of these settings in the remediation, in the continuous, in the reporting. It's insane. So yes, automation is key. If you're going to be around as an MSP, you have to start automating. But yeah, thank you for those closing thoughts, Corey. Thank you for being a guest. This was a great episode. And we do have 2 more episodes of this season we can highlight here. So we have Tim Schnur coming up next week to talk about some of these personalization settings. And then we do have Joshua Copeland, which I think I asked you if you knew him, Corey, but he is another Bossier guy from Louisiana. So he's an absolute friend of mine. And he's going to be closing
Good
season
dude.
2 for us, talking about these Windows workstation and server settings. And then we're going to browsers. But again, thank you, Corey, for being here. Thank you, Rich, as always, and look forward to seeing